There are wounds we carry that don't bleed, but they never stop hurting. They show up in the middle of relationships, in moments of self-sabotage, in the echo of our inner critic whispering, "You're not enough." But what if that voice isn't yours? What if you've spent your whole life trying to become someone just to earn love that should have been unconditional? Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." And often that burden has the shape and voice of the mother. This video is not about blame. It's not about vilifying our mothers. It's about illuminating something far more uncomfortable, the parts of ourselves still governed by her. Because until we bring awareness to this hidden architecture of the psyche, the maternal complex, we risk living a life that is not truly ours. In this journey, we will descend into the psychological underworld where the mother wound takes root. We'll explore how early emotional bonds shape adult patterns, how unmet childhood needs become lifelong pursuits, and how the image of the mother, internalized in our psyche, becomes a shadow that either nurtures or devours us from within. If you've ever felt trapped in cycles of guilt, people-pleasing, emotional reactivity, or endless striving for approval, this is not random. It is the unconscious calling for integration, and you are not alone. The mother wound is not just personal, it is archetypal. It stretches across generations, across cultures, embedded deep within the collective unconscious. But here's the truth: you will never fully heal until you face this, not to fight it, but to understand it. So if you're ready to look beyond symptoms and dive into the source, stay until the end. Because we won't just analyze, we'll walk together through 3 powerful steps toward individuation, the very path Jung believed to be the soul's calling. Are you ready to meet the mother within? Then let's begin. The hidden complex, when the mother never leaves. Most people believe they've left childhood behind when they move out, get a job, or start a family. But in the world of the psyche, time doesn't move so simply. Some relationships don't end when we grow up. They continue inside us, silently shaping every thought, reaction, and decision. And one of the most powerful of these internal forces is what Carl Jung called the mother complex. To Jung, a complex isn't just a problem or personality trait. It's a cluster of emotional energy formed in childhood that splits off from the conscious ego, and it operates autonomously, meaning it acts without our permission. When someone lashes out and says, "I don't know what came over me," or when they shut down in a moment that demands connection, it's often a complex that just took the wheel. Now imagine that complex is tied to the mother, the first source of life, love, and identity. Then consider what happens when that early bond is wounded, inconsistent, or overbearing. The result isn't just pain, it's a blueprint for attachment, for identity, for survival. Children don't have the option to question their parents. To survive, they adapt. If love is conditional, they strive to please. If the mother is emotionally absent, they become hypervigilant. If she's intrusive or overprotective, they learn to hide. The child builds an internal version of the mother, a psychological imprint that continues to operate in the adult psyche. And long after the real mother is gone, this internal mother remains. A voice, a presence, a filter through which the world is experienced. In men, this complex may show up as passivity, difficulty separating from the feminine, or even a compulsive need for nurturing that leads to dependency. In women, it can manifest as inner criticism, guilt for independence, or unconscious rivalry with the mother figure, carried even into friendships, work, or romantic relationships. But here's the most crucial part. The mother complex can be both positive and negative. There may be a nurturing, wise inner mother, the great mother archetype, but there can also be the devouring mother who suffocates individuality in the name of care. And when that shadow side dominates, the adult feels trapped. Forever the child, seeking approval, fearing rejection, unable to fully emerge as a self. This is not weakness. It is the legacy of survival. But survival is not the same as living. To live authentically, one must recognize when a complex is operating. Not to destroy it, but to bring it into awareness, because only then can the ego reclaim its power and choose a new way forward. And that journey begins with a single realization. The mother is no longer outside me. She lives inside. The mother inside, the emotional echo of childhood. Some wounds don't leave scars on the body. They echo in the silence between thoughts, in the way a person doubts their worth after a compliment, in how they pull away just as love gets close, in that quiet panic that rises when they're finally seen. These are not logical reactions, they're emotional echoes, remnants of a relationship so foundational, so primal, that it becomes part of the psyche's architecture. Jung taught that behind every personal experience is something archetypal, a force larger than the individual. And when it comes to the mother, we're dealing not just with the literal woman who raised us, but with the archetype of the mother itself, both the life giver and the life consumer. As children, we rely on our mothers not only for food and care, but for mirroring. To see ourselves reflected in her eyes is how we begin to know we exist. But what happens when that reflection is distorted or absent? A mother who only responds when the child is quiet, obedient, or successful teaches something dangerous. That love must be earned. This conditional mirroring becomes a core belief. I am only lovable when I meet expectations. And long after childhood, this belief takes root in the adult psyche, shaping relationships, careers, self-worth. It becomes the inner critic, that sharp voice that says, "You're not doing enough." The guilt that arises when resting, the shame after expressing a boundary. But here's the painful truth, that inner voice isn't yours. It was inherited and internalized. Jung spoke of this process as identification with the complex. When the emotional charge of a relationship fuses with the ego, the individual can no longer distinguish between their true self and the wound. They believe the critical mother is their own mind. Imagine a young girl praised only when she's quiet and helpful. She grows into a woman who silences herself in meetings, apologizes for her needs, and chooses partners who demand emotional labor. She's not weak, she's loyal. Loyal to the internalized mother whose love felt conditional. This is the tragedy of the mother wound. It tricks the adult into replaying childhood roles, hoping for a different outcome. But the past doesn't change unless we change our relationship to it. To do that, one must begin to observe the inner mother, to notice when her voice appears, to question whether the guilt, the shame, the striving truly belong to the present. Because healing is not about deleting the past, it's about differentiating from it. The true self begins to emerge the moment we say, "This feeling is familiar, but it's not mine anymore." And in that space of awareness, a crack forms in the old identity. A small opening where the light of individuation can begin to enter. If this resonates, if you've ever heard that voice inside and felt it wasn't truly yours, subscribe now. Because the next chapter will uncover how even love can leave a scar, and how to spot it. The invisible wound. Love with strings attached. Love is supposed to heal, but when love comes with conditions, it doesn't feel like love at all. It feels like performance. Many grow up believing they were deeply loved, and perhaps they were. But what kind of love was it? The question Jung would ask is not, "Were you loved?" but rather, "Were you allowed to be yourself within that love?" Because the most enduring psychological wounds aren't caused by violence or absence alone. They are carved slowly, quietly, in the moments a child realizes, "When I cry, I'm ignored. When I'm loud, I'm punished. When I achieve, I'm praised." This isn't love, it's a transaction, and the price is authenticity. Jung called this the beginning of the false self, a protective identity built to secure the only thing the child truly needs: connection. So the child performs. They become helpful, quiet, perfect, invisible. Whatever is required to keep the love flowing, even if it means abandoning parts of themselves in the process. This is the invisible wound, not easily seen, even by the one who carries it. Because from the outside, the adult appears functional, even successful. They may be high achievers, caretakers, perfectionists, but underneath, there's often a deep fatigue, a haunting sense of emptiness, a quiet desperation to be seen without earning it, and the wound whispers, "You have no worth without usefulness. If you disappoint, you'll be left. You must give more than you receive." It's not that the mother didn't love the child, it's that the child learned to edit themselves to remain lovable. And the psyche never forgets that lesson. Jung warned of the danger of over-identifying with this adapted persona. He saw how individuals, especially those who appeared put together, were often the furthest from their true selves, because their identity had been shaped around being who others needed them to be. The wound is sustained not just by what the child experienced, but by what they never had the space to express: anger, grief, needs, all of which were labeled dangerous or selfish, so they were buried, turned inward. And now, in adulthood, these suppressed feelings become symptoms: anxiety, burnout, depression, emotional numbness. But the psyche is wise. It will keep signaling, keep repeating, until the original wound is acknowledged. Healing begins when one dares to ask, what parts of me were not allowed to exist? What version of me did I have to become to receive love? Because in those questions lies the key, not to blame, but to reclaim, to retrieve the child that was left behind, to give yourself finally the unconditional presence you once needed. If you're starting to feel the weight of that invisible wound, comment below with "I see the pattern" and subscribe. Because next, we'll look at how this wound doesn't end with your childhood. It follows you into every relationship. Mirrors of pain. Recreating the mother in others. It's a cruel irony of the psyche. We often find ourselves drawn to the very relationships that wound us, not because we want to suffer, but because something deep within us is still searching for resolution. Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious will be lived out as fate. And nowhere is this more visible than in the patterns we repeat, especially in love. The child who internalized the belief that love must be earned, that presence must be perfect, that needs are dangerous, will unconsciously seek out people who confirm that belief. This is not weakness. This is the psyche attempting to recreate the original wound, hoping this time it can be healed. So the adult, still carrying the mother complex, may find themselves attracted to emotionally unavailable partners, controlling friendships, or even demanding bosses, not by accident, but by repetition. This is what Jung called projection, a process by which the inner world is cast onto the outer, and others begin to play the roles we haven't yet integrated. The emotionally distant partner becomes the cold, unreachable mother. The overly dependent friend mirrors the guilt trap of childhood. The impossible-to-please boss echoes the perfectionism once required to gain maternal approval. And so the cycle continues, over and over again, until awareness breaks the spell. One may notice, why do I keep dating people who won't commit? Why do I feel suffocated in every close relationship? Why do I carry guilt for simply saying no? The answer is rarely in the present. It lies in the unresolved emotional contracts from the past. Because the child within isn't just seeking love. They are seeking redemption. They believe, if I can finally get love from someone like her, then maybe I was worthy all along. But here's the tragedy. No partner, friend, or mentor can give the love the child never received. Not in the way the unconscious craves it. Healing doesn't come from fixing the past through others. It comes from recognizing the pattern and then breaking it. This doesn't mean abandoning relationships. It means stepping out of the role you've been unconsciously performing. It means refusing to play out the same script again and again. Jung often emphasized the power of becoming aware of the archetypes at play, because once you can name the pattern, you're no longer inside it, you're observing it. And from that place of observation, real choice becomes possible. You can love without needing to be perfect. You can walk away without drowning in guilt. You can say, "This isn't love. This is repetition." And that realization is revolutionary, because when you stop trying to get the mother you never had, you create space for something greater, the birth of your true self, liberation without blame, the path to individuation. There's a moment in the healing journey that feels like betrayal, not toward others, but toward the identity you've worn your whole life. Because choosing to step out of the mother wound often feels like turning your back on love itself. But it's not betrayal, it's awakening. Carl Jung wrote that the goal of life is not perfection, but individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating the unconscious into the conscious self, of no longer living as a fragment of someone else's dream. To individuate is to walk a narrow path between loyalty and freedom, between compassion and truth. And that path often begins with a decision not to blame, but to see clearly. Many resist this process because they fear what it might reveal. They fear dishonoring their mother or seeming ungrateful, especially if she did the best she could. But individuation isn't about blame. It's about differentiation. It's the ability to say, she did what she could, and some of it hurt me. I carry her love, and also her wounds. I honor her story, and choose to write my own. This is the mature psychological movement that Jung pointed to again and again. Not rejection of the parent, but integration of the complex. Because until we see our mother not as an ideal nor a villain, but as a human being, flawed, shaped by her own history, limited by her own wounds, we remain emotionally entangled. To stay fused with the mother complex is to stay in the role of the child. To move beyond it is to become a sovereign self. But this isn't a single moment of insight. It's a practice of noticing the inherited guilt and not obeying it. Of hearing the inner critic and choosing not to believe it, of meeting the same emotional trigger and responding from the adult, not the child. Each time we do this, we loosen the grip of the complex. Each time we choose authenticity over approval, we reclaim a part of ourselves. And with each act of inner truth, the mother inside begins to shift. She becomes less of a tyrant, less of a ghost, more of a symbol, a teacher, a mirror, a part of the whole. And in that wholeness, we find freedom. Not the kind that comes from rebellion, but the kind that comes from inner alignment. Because the final stage of healing is not needing your mother to be different, and no longer needing to be the child you once became for her. It is becoming who you truly are, regardless of who she was, and that is individuation. If you felt something shift in you while watching this, subscribe now. Share this video with someone who's unknowingly repeating the pattern, and let's keep awakening together. 3 practical steps toward individuation. By now, something has likely become clear. The mother wound isn't just a memory. It's a pattern, a silent structure in the psyche, and awareness of it is only the beginning. Carl Jung taught that we cannot change what we are not conscious of, but once we see, we have a responsibility to act. That's the essence of individuation, turning insight into inner freedom. So how does one begin? Not with grand gestures or by confronting the past in a blaze of emotion, but with small, consistent acts of psychological truth. Here are 3 powerful steps to start this work. 1. Name the trigger without reacting. The first step toward healing the mother complex is learning to observe without fusion. The moment something stirs, guilt, shame, the need to please, the fear of disappointing, pause. Ask, who am I trying to protect right now? Whose voice is this in my head? Is this reaction coming from the adult in me or the child? This practice interrupts the automatic loop, and in that pause, you create space for choice, because the goal is not to erase the wound, it's to stop being controlled by it. 2. Rewrite your mother's story. Symbolically, take time to write your mother's story, but not as you lived it, as she might have experienced it. What was her upbringing like? Who shaped her emotional world? What unspoken burdens did she carry? This isn't to excuse harm, it's to see archetypally. By recognizing that your mother was also a daughter, perhaps of an emotionally unavailable mother or a wounded father, you begin to humanize her. And in doing so, the complex loses power. You're no longer trapped in the binary of blame or denial. You're stepping into psychological maturity, seeing the lineage, the patterns, the inheritance. And from that view, forgiveness becomes less about emotion and more about understanding. 3. Break one pattern. Intentionally choose one behavior you inherited that no longer serves your true self. Maybe it's apologizing for setting boundaries. Maybe it's over-functioning in relationships. Maybe it's the belief that rest is laziness. Then do something different, on purpose. This small rebellion against the old script is a sacred act. Each time you choose autonomy over obedience, you rewrite the neural pathways shaped by the mother wound. Each time you act from your soul, not your survival strategies, you take one step closer to individuation. This is not a quick process. It's a life's work, but every step matters, because the ultimate goal is not to fix the past, it's to free the future. And that freedom begins when you say, I see the pattern, I honor where it came from, and I choose something new. That is the voice of the self. That is the soul reclaiming its center. That is healing.